Hi all, this is the fifth video in this series of integrating Syncfusion components into an ASP.NET Core MVC project. Here we will be designing a complete dashboard demonstrating Syncfusion chart elements like donut chart and spline chart. Let me close all of the tabs except this layout view here, and let's create a dashboard controller. I will select MVC controller empty, dashboard controller. Now let's add the corresponding views. For that, first of all, we have to add the folder with the same name, dashboard. And let's add a view. Let it be razor empty view index.cshtml, which is the name of the default action inside the controller here, index. Now let me make this controller, dashboard controller, as the default control inside the application. For that, go to the program.cs file and let's change this routing here. Let's replace this home controller to dashboard. Now rest of the coding will be done inside this dashboard controller and its view index here. We are already running this application in my browser, so let's build this project and back to the view. Now let's navigate the dashboard controller. You can provide the controller dashboard here. Since we have made it as a default controller, this will be enough. Or you could click on this home button from this breadcrumb. So currently we are showing the index view of the dashboard controller. Now before going forward with the dashboard, let me allocate a space for the sidebar in this left side here. For that, I will be using the Syncfusion component sidebar. So here it is. More about this component will be discussed once we are done with the dashboard. For now, I will just allocate a space for this component. So here is the component, EJS sidebar. Now for that sidebar, I'm going to create a partial view along with the layout here. So right click here, then add view, select razor empty view. I will name it as underscore sidebar. Now we want to show this sidebar inside this layout just before the content. Content will be shown here and the sidebar will be shown here in the left side. For that, we can add this sidebar partial view into the layout page here. So here we go, partial, and provide the name of the view that we have just created, sidebar. That's it. Now let's add this Syncfusion component sidebar into the new partial view. Here we have the ID, sidebar. Now let's assign a width here. Okay, for now that's enough. Let's build this project and back to the view. That's it. Now we need to assign a left margin for this content equal to the width of this sidebar. Otherwise the content will go under the sidebar, right? So back to the layout. So here we have the div inside that will be showing the content from various controls. Now I'm gonna wrap this div with another div and let's assign this class main content. Now let's apply a left margin for this class. Let it be here, main content, margin left is equal to the same width that we have applied for the sidebar. That's it. Now before going with the dashboard, let me change the background of this sidebar here. For that we can make use of this ID that we have applied here, sidebar. Let me create a new session for the sidebar inside this style sheet. So here we have the background color and let's apply a right border and finally some padding. Now back to the view. That's it. So here we have the sidebar. We will get into that later once we are done with the dashboard here. Since we have added the sidebar in the layout page, you could see the same in other controls also. Let's reload this. Here we go. Now inside the dashboard, first of all, I want to remove this heading part, which you can see here. Along with the heading, we have a breadcrumb. You don't need to show that inside this dashboard. And also, if you check the layout view here, from the Bootstrap grid system, we are only assigning 10 columns out of 12 for the contents like these here. But for the dashboard, we need 12 out of 12. For that, inside this dashboard index view, let's pass something inside the view data saying we are currently showing the dashboard. So inside this key is dashboard, let's pass true. Now back to the layout view. Inside this content, this raw div is containing the heading part which shows these HTML elements including the breadcrumb. So I will add an if clause here. If, let's check the view data that we have assigned here. If it is not assigned, we can say current view is not from the dashboard. So we will be showing this heading part here. Let's reload this dashboard. Boom, that's it. The heading part remains here for the other contents. Now let's conditionally apply this grid column here. First of all, we'll start with this @wrapping. Let's check the view data. If it is null, then we will apply this clause, else the entire 12 columns. Now let's add components one by one. First of all, I want to show the total income, total expense, and the balance in the given date range. So back to the dashboard controller here. For demonstrating the dashboard components, I'll be considering last 7 days transactions. So first of all, I will create the date variables with start date and end date. Now for the start date, we need to minus 6 days from the current date. Let me duplicate this for the end date, which is today itself. Now let's retrieve all transactions in this given date range. List, which is of the type transaction model. Let's add the corresponding namespace. And here we will make an async request. Context.transactions. Sorry, we forgot to inject the DB context. So we just need to add a constructor for this controller. But then we can use this snippet CTOR. First of all, we will be having a private property of the type application DB context as underscore context. And here we have the constructor parameter of the type application DB context. The value for this parameter will be passed from the dependency injection, and we can make use of this private property to interact with the DB like this. Now for this transaction entity, we have a foreign key navigational property, which is category here. We also need to fill data into this navigational property. For that, we could do this include. Now let's filter the transactions based on the date. And finally, let's call this async function here. Now, since we are using an async method, we have to change this action method return type as task action result. Now, in order to use this include function, we have to import this entity framework here. Now, inside this list of transactions, we have all the transactions that we have to consider for the rest of the dashboard here. Now, let's find sum of amounts for income transactions. So here we go. Total income. We can calculate that from this collection, selected transactions. We have to filter all the transactions where the transaction type is income. So here we have the navigational property category where we have the type property and it should be equal to income. Now let's call the aggregate function sum over the column amount. Now let's save this to the viewback. And let's convert this to a currency format. Now we want to find the total expense. For that, I will copy paste this below. Now let's find the balance amount, meaning total income minus expense. Now let's save the same into the viewback. Now let's show a cart element inside the dashboard for each of these 3 summaries. It will be shown inside the dashboard at the top. So here we have the dashboard index. Let's add some summary widgets. So then here we have the bootstrap grid. Let's add some bottom margin. Here we have the first widget. Now let's apply the flex box as row. Now here we have the custom class widget. We have already added this class in our style sheet. Now here we have some additional classes, summary. Since we are dealing with income inside this widget, we have added this custom class income. Now inside that we have 2 divs like this. Inside this div we'll be showing a phone over some icon. Let me copy these flex classes from here. Instead of flex row we have flex column, justify content center, and let's apply padding from all sides of the range 5. Now here we have the phone over some icon. Now for the second div, let's copy paste these classes from the first div. For aligning the content horizontally and vertically in center, we will apply this class. And let's apply some padding on y-axis of the range 3. Inside that, we'll be having a span. And we will apply this bootstrap text class lead. And here we have the title for the widget total income. Just beneath that, we have the h1 element. And let's apply these bootstrap classes. Now we can use the viewback that we have stored here. We have to use the prefix @simple. Here we go. Now let me build this project and back to the view. So here we have the total income. We will fix this misalignment here in a bit. Let's add rest of the widget. For that, I will just copy paste this div here. This is for expense. Now based on the custom class that we have applied here, we'll be changing the appearance of the elements inside it. Total expense. Now let's replace the same inside this view back key. Now let's do the same for this balance widget. For balance, the corresponding view back key is balance itself. Now let's add the CSS rules for these custom classes: summary, balance, expense, and income. So here we have the style sheet, site.css, and I'll be adding the custom CSS for the widgets under this existing session here. As always, I will be pasting the CSS rules directly here. So here we have applied some styles based on the presence of the summary clause, and the containing font over some icon color will be decided based on the presence of these classes. And here we have added an extra rule which is required for the chart elements that we are going to add in a bit. So here we have defined the custom classes that we have used inside the index view here. Now here we forgot to wrap these widget divs with the bootstrap column divs. So let's add that here. Class is equal to call md4. Now let's build this project and back to the view. That's it. Now you could see the bracket wrapping for this balance here. In last 7 days, total expense is greater than total income. So when we subtract total income with total expense, we will get a minus value. In order to avoid this bracket wrapping, we can do this. For that, we can make use of this class culture info. Now let me add the corresponding namespace. Now this deals with the local conventions for data like string, date, amount, etc. Now we are going to modify the default culture. So here we go. We will create a specific culture and we will specify it as US. Now let's change the number format. Currency negative pattern is equal to 1. Now instead of calling this toString function, we can make use of the string function format. Here we have the new culture, and let's pass the currency format here. And here we have the amount that we want to format. Now back to the dashboard. That's it. Now, in order to avoid the negative balance, let me modify the list of transactions. Now, let's reload this dashboard. That's it. For better user experience, you can add a drop-down list on top of this dashboard so that the user can choose the date range of transactions for the charts and other widgets below it, whether it is last 7 days or last 30 days or this year, etc. Now, let's add rest of the Syncfusion chart elements. So here we have the Syncfusion demo page for ASP.NET Core. I have given the link in video description, and let's go for the charts here. Now first of all, I want to show expense by category, meaning how much we spent in each of the expense category. In this left side menu, we have plenty of Syncfusion components for visualizing and summarizing the data that we have inside the application. First of all, I'll be using this component here, donut, under accumulation chart. So this is how the element looks like, and here we have the corresponding responsible code. With this chart element, we want to show the expense in various expense categories. Now you could see the detailed documentation on these chart elements inside the documentation here. Okay, so here we have plenty of components related to chart, and at the top here you could see various common things that you can apply across all of these chart elements. Now in order to make use of this donut chart, we have to use this element here, accumulation chart. So back to the index view. Here we have done with these summary widgets. Let me collapse these one by one. Now we'll be adding a donut chart, then followed by a spline chart. Here also we'll be using the bootstrap grid system, so let me copy paste this div here. Inside that we have the grid column with 4 columns. Inside that we'll be showing the donut chart. Along with that we'll be having another column with 8 columns for spline chart. First of all, we'll wrap everything with the class widget. And there is one more custom class which is chart. The corresponding CSS rules are already added into the style sheet. Now let's add a title. And here we have the custom class, and let's apply the padding from all the sides of the range 4. And here we have the heading, expense by category. Now just beneath that, we'll be using this Syncfusion component EJS accumulation chart. And let's provide an ID donut chart. We'll work on it in a bit. Actually, this custom class title is not needed, so let me remove that. Let's build this project and back to the view. So that's it. Here we have the chart. Currently it is empty. By default, these chart elements will have a white background. So in order to override that, we can use this property from this Syncfusion component background. Let's build this project and back to the view. So here we have the donut widget. Currently we are not passing any data into the component, so there is nothing inside that. So let's pass the required data from the dashboard controller. Now if you check the demo here, it is passing the data from the view bag, and you could see the view bag inside this controller, donut controller. See, it is a list of this object donut data which is having these properties: x value, y value, and the text. So this x value property is treated as the name or title of the slices. And the percentage that is shown here is from this property text. And this y value will determine how much of this donut is to be assigned for each of these slices here. So we'll be creating a similar list of objects inside the controller. So here we have a separate section for the donut chart, expense by category, which is what we expect in an expense tracker application, right? And we'll be saving this list of data into the view bag donut chart data. Let me copy paste this here, donut chart data. We'll be using the same list of transactions that we have already retrieved into this list. Now let's filter all the expense transactions. Group transactions based on the category. So here we have the aggregate function group by category ID. Now let's select the properties accordingly. Instead of creating a separate class and creating the corresponding instance, we'll be using an anonymous object. So here we have the new keyword. First for the amount, which is summed after the grouping. Now this amount property will be treated as this property here, y value. Now let's pass the text, which is what we are showing inside the portions here. So the corresponding property will be formatted amount. We are using the same sum. We are just formatting this amount into a currency format. Now let's provide this property x value, which is the title for each of these options here. So here it is, category title with icon. So that we have to use this first function. Hope you know the need of this first function since we are dealing with a group query here. We are concatenating the category icon with the title. After all, let's call this method to list. Now let's pass this view back to our donut chart. For that, we have to create another child component called accumulation series. So here we have the parent series collection. Inside that, we have the accumulation series. Now let's pass the data source with the view bag. Now we need to map each of these properties here, property names, to these corresponding mappings here, x value, y value, and text. For that, we have these properties. X name is equal to title with icon. Y name will be this amount property here. Now the label for each of these labels here with these percentages will be assigned with another child tag accumulation series data label. And with this property name, we can map this property here, formatted amount, which is what we want to show on these portions. So let's use this property formatted amount. Okay, that's enough with the data label. Here we have a typo inside this property data source. You can easily detect the misspelled property from its color itself. The highlighted color will be different from the properly typed property. Let's correct this to data source. Let's build this project and back to the view. Boom. That's it. Currently, as you can see, the labels on these portions are not shown. In order to show that, we can explicitly mention that with the property visible as true. It's not necessary to assign the property with the boolean value true. You just need to keep the property here. Let's build this, back to the view. That's it. Now here we have a pie diagram instead of a donut chart. Now in order to make this switch into donut chart, we just need to do this. We just need to assign this property inner radius. So the inner 60% of the pie diagram will be removed. Let's build the project. That's it. So these are called labels. The amount in dollar. Now, if there is a situation where these slices are congested, then there is a possibility of overlapping of these labels. In order to avoid that, we can add this Boolean property, enable smart labels. So this is what we call labels, and these mapping to these slices here are called legends. Now let's customize these legends. For that, we'll be adding another tag, accumulation chart legend settings. First of all, let's assign the position as top. Now, as a prefix to these legends here, we have a complex icon which you can see along with all of these legends. Instead of that, we just need a circle. For that, we can make use of a property from this tag, accumulation series, legend shape. Let it be circle. Now we have a perfect circle. Now if you click on these legends here, you can toggle the visibility of the corresponding portions inside the chart. If you want to disable that provision, you can add this property, toggle visibility, to this tag here. By default, it is true. To disable the feature, just pass false here. Now let's change the font style of these legends. For that, we can use this child tag, legend settings text style. First of all, let's set the color as white, and let's change the size also. Let's build this. That's it. Now there is one more feature that I want to enable on this chart here, which is tooltip. For that, we just need to add another tag, accumulation chart tooltip settings. Now you could see a tooltip along with each of these portions here. So that's all about the donut chart, which is describing expense in each of the category. Now let's add one more chart, which is Spline chart, which you can see inside the demo here, Spline chart. So this is how it looks like. You could see the corresponding documentation here under chart. So here we have the basic overview of the chart element, and if you go through the documentation, you could see under this basic chart, by using the same component EJS chart, we can choose various types of chart with this property type. So this is a line chart, which you can see here. This is what we call line chart. Okay. Now this is another type of chart, step line, which you can see here, step line. Like this, there are plenty of options, but in our program, we'll be using Spline chart, which you can see here. Okay, so back to the index view. So here we have the second div for the Spline chart. Into that, I will copy paste this widget div here. Now let's modify it accordingly. With this chart, we are comparing income versus expense. Now instead of this donut chart, we'll be using this component EJS chart. And here we have the ID Spline chart. Let's build this project and back to the view. So here we have the chart element. Now before going forward with the chart component here, let me add few more transactions into the app. Now back to the dashboard, reload the view, and here we have the updated donut chart. I forgot to sort these categories by the amount that we have here. So let's do that. Inside the action method here, we just need to call this aggregate function order by descending. So the first category will be having the maximum expenditure, and we want to make this sort on this column amount that we have created here. Let's build the project. So here we have the categories in the sorted order. We'll be changing color of these portions in a bit. Now let's go ahead with this Spline chart here. Now first of all, let's start from changing this white background. For that, I will copy paste this background property from the donut chart. Now like we have added a series collection here, we need the same inside this chart component also. So here we have the parent tag series collection. Inside this we can have any number of series like we can see inside the demo here. Here we have 3 series. Each of these curved line represent a series. In our component here, we'll be showing a series for income and a series for expense by date. So on the x-axis, we'll be showing the last 7 dates. So each of the series, whether it is income or expense, will be showing some of the amount for that particular day. So in brief, inside this collection, we'll be having 2 series. So this is for the income. Let me duplicate this for the expense. Now let's generate the corresponding data from our action method here. So here we have the Spline chart session where we are comparing income versus expense. First of all, let's deal with income. Now before getting into that, let me create a custom class here called Spline chart data. It contains 3 properties. First of all, a string property, day, for saving formatted date. This is for income and one more for the expense. Now let's create a list of the type this spline chart data class. So here it is. I will name it as income summary. We are only considering last 7 days transactions here, so I will use this collection, selected transactions. Let's filter income transactions. Now let's group based on the date of transaction. Now let's select the properties. With that, we'll be creating an instance of the class spline chart data. New spline chart data. Now let's populate the properties accordingly. First of all, day. We have to call this method first. From that, access this property date, and let's do the date formatting here. We only need the day and month, and finally the sum of the income for the day. Now finally, let's call this function to list. Now let's create one more collection for the expense. So I will copy paste this and let's change accordingly. Instead of income, we'll be using this property expense. Now if you look at the data passed to this demo here we have a list of objects, and each of these objects represent a day in this graph, meaning a point on this x-axis here. And in that same object, we have to pass value for 3 different series here. See, here we have 3 values for each of the series that we have. So in order to pass a similar list of objects like this, we have to combine both of these lists of income and expense by their date. So that's what we are going to do here. First of all, let me create a list containing last 7 days date. Now we can make use of this function enumerable, and let's specify the range here. Values including 0 up to 7. The value 7 will be excluded in this range. Now we can call this function select. So here we are basically making 7 iterations. Inside that we are just incrementing the date by 1 day. So the start date is there inside this property here. On each iteration, we will add the value from the iteration variable I. So initially its value will be 0, meaning there is no change. Then on each iteration it will add 1 day to this start date. Now we want to convert this date to this same format here. Finally, let's call this method to array. Now you might be wondering, let me correct this convention. Let's change this to uppercase. Now you might be wondering, why do we need this third list? In last 7 days, there might be days but there is no transaction either of the type income or expense. So in order to prevent from skipping a date without any transaction, we are using this list here. So we don't skip any of the day in between. Now let's combine these 3 lists and we'll be saving that into the view bag with the key spline chart data. So here we have the link queue expression. Day from the list last 7 days is joined with the income list. On this condition, day, which is the formatted date from this last 7 days, equals income.day. And the result can be referred as day income joined. So basically this becomes an inner join, meaning only the records that satisfies this condition will be selected. That's not what we want. We need all the days from this list independent of whether we have an income transaction on that day. So we have to use left join. So that we could do this, just calling this method default if empty. Now into it, let's join the expense list. Here also we are using the left join, so let me copy paste this. Now finally, let's make the selection. Here we have the anonymous object with these properties. Day is equal to the day from the list of days here. Then income, and here we go, we will be checking whether income is null or not, meaning there will be dates without any income transaction. If that's the case, we will return 0, else the income from the table income. Now here we have the expense. Now we will be making use of this view bag in this series here. So first of all, we have the data source property. Into that we can pass the view bag that we have created here. Now we have to map the data on x-axis and y-axis. That we have these properties x name. Into that we'll be mapping this property day. And then we have the y-axis. For that, we can use this y-name property. With this series, we are dealing with the income transactions. So we'll pass income, which contains the sum of income transactions on a particular day. Now we have to specify a name for this series. It will be income. Now we have to specify the type of the chart, which I will copy from this documentation here. Now let me copy paste this for the expense series. And let's modify these properties here. Let me build this and back to the view. No data is displayed yet. Unlike this donut chart or pie chart, these charts with x-axis and y-axis, we have to configure the axes separately. For that, here we have the tag chart primary x-axis, and we can configure the y-axis with each chart primary y-axis. Now inside the x-axis, we have to tell which type of data we are going to render. As you can see inside the documentation here, these are the various 4 types of axes based on the data that we are going to display. You could check the same inside the API reference also. Just ignore this first prefix and then type the rest without the hyphen. Then you could see the corresponding API documentation here. Chart primary x-axis. For this class, we don't have any properties listed like we have seen for other component classes. Instead, you could see the inherited class here, chart axis. So let's search for this class, chart axis. So here it is. Now inside the properties, you could see this property value type. So these are the various accepted values for this property. Double meaning a numeric axis, date time renders date time, then category, something referring to a category. And here we have the final value type which renders log axis. In our project here, on x-axis, we are showing the day property which is actually the formatted date. So it is a string, so which comes under this type category. So we can specify the value type of the x-axis like this. Value type category. Let's build this project and back to the view. Boom, that's it. On x-axis we have the last 7 days date and amount is shown on y-axis. 0 amount is here, not at the base. Its position will vary based on the data that we have assigned into the chart. Now let's configure this chart one by one. First of all, I want to remove this rectangular border here. For that, we can make use of this tag chart area. Inside that, we will set the border width as 0. Now let's remove these horizontal and vertical lines representing points on each axis. For that, we can make use of these existing tags, primary x-axis and primary y-axis. So here we go. We will set the grid line width as 0. Let me duplicate this and let's move this into the y-axis. It is too much, right? So let's keep the horizontal lines with some custom styles. I will set the width as 1 and let's apply a light color. Now instead of a solid line, we will use dashed line. So here we have the proportion of the width for the dash and in between white space. Okay, sorry, by mistake I have changed the area border. Let me cut this and paste into this y-axis. And here we will keep the width property as 0. Now let's remove these tick lines along with these x and y-axis values. So that we can use this tag major tick lines. Width is equal to 0. Let's duplicate this and let's move this into the y-axis. Build this. That's it. Now let's change the thickness of these lines here. For that we can use the width property on this series tag here. Width is equal to 3. Let me copy paste this for the expense series also. Okay, now let me show you how to change the color of these series lines here. We just need to use the property palettes from the E chart. So here it is, palettes, and here we will be passing an array of strings in C#. So I will apply these 2 colors here. Let's build this. That's it. Now similarly, you can change the colors of these donut chart slices. You can use the same property palettes. So let me copy paste this into the accumulation chart here. In accumulation chart, the property is there inside the accumulation series. Here I will be passing 10 hexadecimal colors. Let's build this and back to the view. Here it is. So that's how we can customize the color. Now let's deal with the legends like we have done inside the donut. For that, after this series collection, we'll be adding another tag, eChart legend settings. Let's copy paste that from this donut chart here. Let's replace this accumulation chart with chart. Build the project, back to the view. So here we have the legends. Let's move this to the right side. For that, we can use this property alignment. And let's assign it as bar. Now we have to apply a tooltip like we have applied here. That also I will copy from this donut chart. Remove this accumulation. Let's build this, back to the view. So here we have the tooltip. Now the tooltip is different for different series at a given date. Now instead of that, we want a shared tooltip so that if we place the cursor here, we could see both income and expense for this given date here. For that, just set this property shared. See? Now in order to keep this even minimal, I'll remove this y-axis line here. For that, we can use this tag inside the primary y-axis tag, line style, set the width as 0. That's it. Now after these two chart components here, let me add a widget for showing recent 5 transactions inside the app. So let me collapse this chart session here. Now let's deal with recent transactions. So here we have the Bootstrap grid system. And here we have the column with half of the width. Inside that we can add the widget div. Then we have the title that I will copy from this donut chart here. Recent transactions. And the content will be shown inside the div. And here we are applying the padding from all the sides except from top. So this will apply horizontal padding, and here we have the bottom padding. Now in order to show the recent transactions, I will be using the grid component that we have used in other pages inside the application. So here it is, EJS grid, and here we have the ID. Now back to the action method, let's retrieve the recent 5 transactions. So here we have the view back, a void, and here we have the context, and let's make use of the db set transactions. Now let's populate the navigational property for the category, and let's order this by date in descending order so that we will get the recent transactions. And let's take the 5 transactions after sorting, and let's convert this into a list. Now we can pass this view back to this grid here. Data source is equal to the view bag that we have just populated. Now let's copy paste the columns from this transaction grid here, except the last action column. So that's all about the grid. Sorry, here we have a typo, data source. Let's build this and back to the app. Boom, that's it. So here we have the grid containing last 5 transactions. Now if you want to remove this horizontal line inside the grid, you can set that here, grid lines is equal to none. Now for better convenience, you can provide a button beneath this grid for navigating the transaction index view. So if necessary, user can see all the existing transactions. Now in order to fill up this empty space here, I will add a dummy widget. So along with this bootstrap column, I will add a div with the same width. And here we have the widget div. And here we have the child div. Into that, we will be applying the flex classes like this. These 2 classes will make the content at center horizontally and vertically. Inside the div, we'll be showing a phone over some icon. Here we have the text widget saying plus widget. This is a phone over some icon representing a plus icon. Okay, so here we have the dummy widget. In order to have the same width as that of this recent transactions widget, we just need to apply this bootstrap class h100 so that it will apply the 100% width to these 2 divs. That's it. So here we have done with dashboard. Now before getting into the sidebar or side menu, let's replace this navbar with a matching background. Now the existing navbar is created with the bootstrap navbar here. Here we have the layout.cshtml, and here we have the navbar which is responsible for the navbar here. Now you can see various bootstrap navbars if you go to the corresponding documentation. So go to the website getbootstrap.com. Then inside the documentation, let's search for Navbar. And I will be copying this sticky navbar, which will be fixed at the top. So here it is. Let me copy this and let's replace it here. Let's remove this light background. Now let's apply some padding for this container, both horizontally and vertically. The first item will be a phone over some icon corresponding to a magnifying glass. And this is where you can implement the search option inside the application. So this will be the first icon. Now rest of the icons will be wrapped within a div like this. Here we have a phone over some icon for showing reminders inside the application. Now let me duplicate this, and this will be corresponding to the notification regarding recent messages or chats. Let's build this and back to the app. So here we have the top navbar. Now let's customize that inside the style sheet. So I will add a new session for navbar here. Now let me paste the styles here. So basically here we have applied a background color, then customize the appearance of the phone over some icons and the hover state of the phone over some icons. And also I have added the styles for an image, which I will be adding in a bit. So this is how it looks like. Now along with these phone over some icons, let me show you a profile picture so that you can implement the features like logout option and the profile details and account details. So here we have the profile picture. Let me copy this and paste it into our www root folder here. Now let's add the image element here. Here we have the relative path profile.jpg. Now in order to customize its appearance, I will be adding this custom class profile pic. So here we have the session for profile pic styles. Now let me paste the styles here. Let's build this project, back to the view. So that's it. That's all about the navbar. Let's scroll to bottom. You see the navbar is fixed at the top and the content is scrolling just beneath that. In next video, we'll be designing a sidebar containing a vertical menu. For more awesome videos like this, please consider subscribing to this channel called Affection if you haven't yet. If you found this video helpful, please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues.